Welcome to Propaganda Loves You, the show that asks and answers the question, if Donald Trump wants to secure Greenland from Russia and China, why doesn't he do it with the treaties he already has? I'm Kodie, your host for this episode, joined by Arthur and Joe.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Welcome back to Propaganda Loves You. This is season 2 kickoff, and oh man, what season 2 we're diving into here, I guess. Joe, Arthur, how are you guys doing today? It's been a while since we've been on camera, on mic, actually putting something out. So how are you guys doing? How has the break treated you personally? Hopefully better than the rest of the world.
It's freaking cold, and that's like the body reaction. And yeah, the break, maybe some reprieve from the labor, but the mental anxiety just continues to get exacerbated, it seems.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah, ditto on the frickin' cold. Just watching the freezing rain and sleet and stuff come down through the window now. Big day of snow for a lot of the country. The break's been good overall for me, just kind of relaxing from not having to do all the teaching stuff. I've been reading a lot, just trying to curl up with a book and do a lot of reading. And we did a winter project at the house. I did some wainscoting and we did some wallpaper in our dining room. So that was a fun little winter project to take our mind off of things. So yeah,
Nice.
Not too bad overall.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I've just been snowboarding as much as possible over the break and trying not to think about things too much. But yeah, like you guys said, it's impossible with where we are in the world today. So what we wanted to do for season 2, we talked a lot about structure and kind of how we're doing the podcast for season 1. Still learning as we go. And obviously this is a secondary endeavor for all of us. So one thing we wanted to mention was just for season 2, kind of how we're structuring the podcast could be a little bit different. For our core episodes, we tried to keep those topical and relevant to what's going on. And so we're structuring those a little bit more to where we're going to try and keep them around 45 minutes, try and give you guys like 1 or 2 big things that are happening that are relevant, and also take like another, 20-minute mini deep dive on a certain topic to really look at it from a propaganda or disinformation angle, look at the narratives that are coming out and trying to break those down a little bit. And so we'll do that today. Today, the main topic that we're going to hit on is actually one of our kind of like a detour through history mini deep dives on NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. What is it? Where did it come from? Was it useful? Has it been useful? I don't know. It depends on who you listen to. I think according to the current administration, I don't even know if NATO is something that they know the acronym, what it actually says, like what that spells out. But they do not have a lot of credit or do not believe in it very much. So we'll be talking about that today and the implications of the Trump administration's continued push to get some sort of ownership in Greenland and what that can mean for NATO. Before we get into those things, we've been gone for like 6 weeks or something like that. So I have a couple different news article headlines that I'd like to read off. And you guys can tell me if you think you know where it's coming from, like what country or possibly even the news article. But I'll just read off a few of these to get your guys' thoughts. So the first title here is U.S. Political Revolution, a top global risk for 2026, Eurasia Group think tank. This one has like a I should have removed the Eurasia Group think tank portion there because it's honestly it's tricking you. It's not,
That's the part that was confusing me. I was like, wait, how do I make that make sense?
I'm hopeful it's true. Yeah, it's got to be true. And it's got to be like London Times, When you said Eurasia think tank, it just made me think like credible European.
I like it. That
that could be deceptive.
Is a question like, is it real and where does it come from?
Yeah, just I mean these will be real, just kind of like where you think it's coming from. Arthur, you said somewhere in like London, EU, something like that. So.
Although it's a really good strategy if you just drop that kind of stuff after a fake one and you're just like, U.S. think tank 2021. Oh,
Yeah, I don't have a guess for where it's from or anything. I feel like a lot of the Western non-US world is concerned about that, probably. So
That's fair.
could come from anywhere.
yeah.
This
And whether it's true or not, like a think tank could just come out with that.
That's true. Yeah. This is from CBC News. So that's the Canadian broadcast service. They're the ones that are putting that out. That's on YouTube. Happy to link that one there. U.S. withdrawal from WHO, that's the World Health Organization, risks global safety, agency says in detailed rebuttal.
Yeah.
Maybe like Doctors Without Borders or something.
Well, that's good. That's a really good one.
It is totally legit. That one's directly from the United Nations. That's the UN News Global Perspective Human Stories. So that's from them. All right. So this one is Britain discusses possible deployment of troops to Greenland amid Trump's statements.
Say false, only because I read the whole France similar thing. So I think maybe you're taking the France thing and you put in the UK name to throw it off.
This was from the Telegraph. That was back from like January 11th. I think since then, multiple European countries and NATO allies have sent troops to Greenland to participate in joint exercises as a deterrent from the U.S. invading Greenland, which is a weird thing to say. Really strange to say that out loud, but that is where we are right now, that European countries are sending troops to Greenland. That's how seriously they're taking the threat. And then last one, and this is also, these are all true. So this one here, U.S. immigration agents shot at people 16 times under Trump's crackdown.
Only 16?
Right? Yeah, that seems
Surprised
low,
by
right?
that.
Yeah, that's the reported number.
Yeah. So data compiled, this one's from The Guardian. This was on Friday, 9 January. So yeah, obviously multiple more shootings have taken place since 9 January. And this data compiled by news nonprofit, the trace shows 29 incidents as of 9 January, including 16 shootings that had taken place. So those are a few articles that have been written, headlines that have posted while we've been off the air. Unfortunately, none of these are I didn't go looking for anything super positive here. We'll have that at the, hopefully something positive at the end of the episode today, but that's what we got for this one.
For our current events segment, we're going to cover the 2 observers killed in Minneapolis as federal raids escalate. And in January so far, federal immigration enforcement have killed 2 people in less than 3 weeks. One is Renee Good on January 7, a 37-year-old U.S. citizen who was a mother of 3, loves to sing and write poetry, according to CNN, and was a legal observer, fatally shot while in her car. Did you guys watch the video when it originally came out or
Yeah.
anything? Yeah.
Yeah.
Same. And it's pretty damning that nothing was being done on Renee's part to perpetrate anything that was done to her. Of course, no independent investigation has been announced and no body cam footage is coming out. There's been no accountability. And I think as we kind of talked at the top of this episode about how we're going to touch on next week's topic more so around the propaganda of the reasonings here. We see that, they did come out right away, claim that, the officers, of course, feared for their life and there was risk to their own lives and safety. This really sparked mass protests across Minneapolis, and the protests, along with like the heightened context in the city, were really the grounds for what happened just yesterday when ICE came and killed another observer, Alex Reddy, who was also 37. And this one was a bit different. I watched these videos as well, which did you guys also?
Yeah, I saw both of them.
Yeah. This one looks a lot more damning in that, there were about 6 or 7 people on top of him at the time. He never posed any sort of threat to anything going on and was shot and killed. But Alex Preddy, worked for the VA hospital and really was a unit nurse at the Department of Veterans Affairs. There's videos also of him online I watched where he's actually honoring veterans that passed away at the hospital, and he's participated many times in recognizing veterans, standing up for them. Here, he was standing up for a woman as well, and he really believed in service, meaning care and not force. And really the close-up video, you can find these on drop site, but really Preddy was an observer, and during the activity, the footage shows that another agent comes up and an individual shoves them to the ground. Preddy steps in to like help that person, and an agent deploys a chemical irritant directly in his face. And then moments later, there are 8 federal agents that swarm him. They wrestle him to the ground. They beat him over the head with some sort of object. During that time, another officer takes a 9mm pistol that he had on him because he had the legal right to carry it, and he was not touching it. And they take it off him. Another officer sees it and discharges his weapon, multiple times. And within hours, we see the Department of Homeland Security issue, a statement that said that Preddy was approaching U.S. border officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. We see that whole gun propaganda, which I'm sure we'll get into next week, be deployed. And then, if you guys saw this morning too, like Pam Bondi then comes out with this letter to Minneapolis that says that, maybe they'll get rid of ICE if you send us your voter information and registration info, which like, how is that not branded as something akin to terrorism when you threaten terror for political means? It's pretty alarming. And anyway, so there's been a lot of statements from the White House and everything. I think that the news headline is that both cases show that people who are legal observers have been killed, and they have done absolutely nothing to warrant that. And in any case, there are multiple officers that are poorly trained. We've seen things come out where people get into these training programs and they find out that these people have been trained for less than a third of the adequate amount of time that they should be trained. There's just a lot going on, I guess, there. What I really wanted to kind of do was just, read a statement by Preddy's parents that they came out with, and, in all these kind of like obfuscation of all these stories, I guess, and different narratives, the White House coming out with something, Kristi Noem coming out with something, Bondi coming out with all these different stories. The parents wrote this, and, they say that we are heartbroken, but also very angry. Alex was a kind-hearted soul who cared deeply for his family and friends, and also the American veterans whom he cared for as an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis VA hospital. Alex wanted to make a difference in the world. Unfortunately, he will not be with us to see his impact. I do not throw around the hero term lightly. However, his last thought was to protect a woman. The sickening lies told about our son by the administration are reprehensible and disgusting. Alex is clearly not holding a gun when attacked by Trump's murdering and cowardly ICE thugs. He has his phone in his right hand, and his empty left hand is raised above his head while trying to protect the woman ICE just pushed down, all while being pepper sprayed. Please get the truth out about our son. He was a good man. Thank you. Go watch the videos. You can see he's holding absolutely nothing except for his phone, and there was, I don't know, the videos are really damning. So yeah, would love your guys' thoughts on this and kind of discussion around Minneapolis.
My initial thought, Arthur, is just like, you say go watch the video, and I agree with that, even though it's tough to watch, to say the least. Like, what I thought about as you were talking through that, and having seen the video of him when he's turned, like trying to protect that person that was just shoved to the ground, and he's like not even paying attention, and the guy comes over the top with the mace like directly into his face and into the person that he's already pushed over. So like he's disoriented because he's trying to help this person, then he gets hit in the face with mace. I've been pepper sprayed before on purpose for like training and stuff like that, and I was just thinking to myself, like, if I was in that situation, like when I got pepper sprayed, there's no doing anything. Like, especially if this guy hasn't been pepper sprayed previously, or like CS gas and stuff like that. His body's reacting to what's happening, and you're getting like hit, but you can't see, you can't, like, there is just, that's where my head went to this right away. Like, I can imagine what the last less than a minute of his life was just confusion, not knowing what's going on, pain, and then multiple gunshots to the back. I agree that people need to watch that, because as this happens, people are going to get more and more numb to it, the same way that people have with school shootings, to the point where you just see a headline and that's it. And it's going to continue. Like Nome has to go. Kristi Nome has to get impeached. She has to go. Like everybody does. But I mean, there can't be a continued just another shooting happen and then we move on. Even if this is multiple years down the road, there has to be some sort of justice for this, because otherwise, I don't know, everything just kind of falls apart. But I don't know. That's my thought, right? This whole thing is terrible. It's horrible to think about, like, it, even more in the moment of like what that was actually like. I don't know. I don't have anything constructive here, unfortunately, because it's just a terrible situation.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. My main thought, I guess, is related to Arthur, you saying if people should go and watch this, because it's, for me, it's like it's an example of how the media landscape has changed in an important way. Even our generation, we're all roughly around the same age, I feel like, mid-30s or so. As middle millennials or whatever, we kind of grew up in a very transitionary media period. We grew up with traditional cable and print media, and then social media started later in adolescence, and things just started tumbling forward. Now we have the easy access for any person to record and upload a high definition video with clear audio about any situation going on anywhere in the world. It's why Gaza became such a huge issue, because people were able to upload content on TikTok for people to see. It's why we can see atrocities take place in real time. And it's, I think, important to understand the power of that different kind of media, because we've been conditioned to just accept the headlines, to just accept what the news anchor tells us. We're accepting this distance between ourselves and whatever event took place. We're trusting some mediator to explain it to us, to tell us what's important about it, to tell us what we should feel or believe about it. But when we have access to the media, we can watch the event ourselves. And even though we weren't there, we can get a much more clear sense of what actually happened. And like Kodie was saying, it allows us to, like, in a visceral level, and this is why it requires like a content warning for people who are easily overwhelmed or anxious to watch this video. It's so easy to immediately empathize with the suffering that you see on the video that it can, it can overwhelm you. It can incapacitate you, make you feel like emotionally unstable for good reason, because someone's getting murdered like right in front of your eyes, right? It's shocking to see it, but it does allow you to form a more clear opinion for yourself about how you want to view that event, rather than just trusting the headline or trusting whatever you hear a news anchor say. You can go watch the video and think for yourself about how you want to interpret that event. And that's why people should watch it.
I love that.
It makes me think too about the people that, and we'll probably talk about this more next week, as it'll be the main topic. So we'll spend more time looking at this from a propaganda angle of what the administration is specifically saying. But those videos are only there because people are quite literally putting themselves and their lives at risk to take those videos. That's not hyperbole. 2 people have already died because of this. The people that are out there taking those videos are putting themselves in danger. They know that, in order to be able to give you the ability to form your own opinion based off of seeing firsthand experience. So like that's big, and we'll definitely talk about that more as well.
My closing thought on the subject here is kind of that presidents have been impeached for like lying about sex and covering up burglary and like pressuring a foreign government and maybe like firing the wrong person, I think with this Andrew Jackson's, and maybe like inciting a mob to overturn an election. That was the most recent one, which is interesting. It's the same administration. But now we're watching a federal government kill civilians, lie about the circumstances, criminalize the dead preemptively to justify their own narratives, intimidate entire communities, and they're facing no consequences. And they are targeting the people that are the observers, if very much like what Israel did to Palestine at the very beginning. You attack the people that are actually there on the ground who are giving you the information. And it's like the impeachment. I just feel like our political distortion is just insane right now. And like, yes, this entire administration maybe should be charged with like a RICO case, and Kristi Nome and all of them should be completely gone, because this is like about whether you think that state violence should be accountable from your own government killing U.S. citizens that are legal observers. And that's our current events for the week.
Ugh. Yeah, that's rough.
And where's the NRA at? Come on, right to bear arms here, and like
They did.
he wasn't even touching it.
They did come.
Oh, they
They
did?
actually came out with a tweet and said, and it's because the I think it was like the district attorney for that area came and said, tweeted something along the lines of, if you carry a gun and go near ICE agents, you're likely to get shot. Or I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically like, if you have a gun and you're going near federal officers, they're going to be justified in shooting you. And so the NRA actually came out and said, oh no, like having a gun's legal. Like, here's all the things that we've already like fought for all these things for years, in order to do that. So great situation we're in. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors. We are living in an unforgiving digital age where transparency is a liability. It's time to invest in reliable opacity.
I made a catastrophic mistake. I accidentally forwarded a deeply compromising text chain to my entire company's all-staff email. I didn't need a lawyer. I needed a reality reset button.
Most people settle for messy damage control. You, however, deserve better. For a single non-refundable deposit of $1 million, Truth AI systematically purges all digital, archival, and photographic evidence of your incident from every known database.
Let's be clear, we don't file appeals. We eliminate history. Our system ensures that any inconvenient past actions are permanently designated as non-existent data.
It's instantaneous. I checked 5 minutes after the money transfer and the texts were gone. My associates don't even remember the email. It's like having a dedicated editor for my past.
The truth is a matter of managed consensus. Let us manage the consensus.
Guarantee your future by editing your past. Truth AI. Certainty, clarity, compliance. So for main topic this week, what I really wanted to talk about was NATO, like I said up top, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The North Atlantic Treaty from 1949. And what was the point of NATO when it was started? So I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about when NATO's actually been invoked. And then I want to talk about what does Donald Trump's recent rhetoric on Greenland and how they must own it, and what that means as far as NATO itself is concerned. So let's take a quick detour through history for this. So the year was 1949. So this is after World War II. Much of Europe has been destroyed. It's still in rebuilding phases. And the world had just gone through two, not quite back-to-back, but basically back-to-back world wars with multiple conflicts in between. And after the destruction that was World War II, there was a realization that they needed something in order to try and keep the world from continuing to fall into this pattern of regional to global conflict that had been kind of reoccurring over the years before. So what was the purpose of the North Atlantic Treaty initially? The first Secretary General, Lord Ismay, I don't know if you guys ever heard of him or not. I hadn't. This is the first one first heard from me, but the purpose of NATO is pretty cynical and simple. He basically said it was to keep the Russians out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. So considering that this was 1949, while the Soviet Union had been part of the Allies to take down Nazi Germany, it was actually allied with Germany prior, right? We talked about this in the fascism episodes. Hitler decided, no, I want to go after the communists and take them out as well. And so he turned on them. But after World War II, most of the Western nations didn't necessarily look at Russia or the Soviet Union as a continued ally, mostly as an adversary at this point. This is why they're saying NATO was to keep the Russians out, the Americans in, and the Germans down when it was created. Could you say that it was successful at that? I mean, USSR was kind of destroyed. It broke apart into all what is modern day Russia and all the Balkan states, and Ukraine is actually creating a lot of the conflict that we're seeing today. And having said that, it was a Cold War, it wasn't a hot war. We haven't had another World War yet since NATO was created. Doesn't mean that we're going to have one. But as far as like the large scale world wars, it seems that NATO did help in keeping those from occurring again. What I'm going to do really quick is just read. It's not a long treaty, so I'm going to read through some of this very quickly. This is the North Atlantic Treaty. It was signed in Washington, D.C. on 4 April 1949. The parties to this treaty reaffirm their faith in the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations and their desire to live in peace with all peoples and governments. They are determined to safeguard freedom, common heritage, civilization of their peoples, founded on the principles of democracy, individual liberty, and rule of law. They seek to promote stability and well-being in the North Atlantic area. They are resolved to unite their efforts for collective defense for the preservation of peace and security. They therefore agreed to this North Atlantic Treaty. Article 1. The parties undertake, as set forth in the Charter of the United Nations, to settle any international dispute in which they may be involved by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered, and to refrain in their international relations from threat or use of force in any manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. So, I mean, like, just short verse there, like, that we're going to use democratic and means to resolve disputes vice military ones. 2. The parties will contribute toward the further development of peaceful and friendly international relations by strengthening their free institutions, by bringing about a better understanding of the principles upon which these institutions are founded, and by promoting conditions of stability and well-being. They will seek to eliminate conflict in their international economic policies and will encourage economic collaboration between any or all of them. Article 3. In order more effectively to achieve the objectives of this treaty, the parties separately and jointly, by means of continuous and effective self-help and mutual aid, will maintain and develop their individual and collective capabilities to resist armed attack. Article 4. The parties will consult together whenever, in the opinion of any of them, the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened. Article 5. This is the big one. The reason this is the big one, well, let me read it first. The parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all, and consequently they agree that if such an armed attack occurs, each of them, in exercise of the right of individual or collective self-defense, recognized by Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations, will assist the party or parties so attacked by taking forthwith, individually and in concert with other parties, such actions as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force to restore and maintain security of the North Atlantic area. Any such armed attack and all measures taken as a result thereof shall immediately be reported to the Security Council. Such measures shall be terminated when the Security Council has taken the measures necessary to restore and maintain international peace and security. So, Article 5 of the treaty is, as I just read, the one that basically forces the rest of the treaty members to come to the aid of a NATO member if they are attacked. This has been invoked once in the past. The administration likes to continually say that, or has said multiple times, they don't think that our NATO allies would come to our defense if Article 5 was invoked. That's come from the president, right? I don't even know if he said Article 5, but if we were intact. The only time that this treaty has been invoked, Article 5 specifically, is when the U.S. was attacked on September 11th. And NATO responded. That's what led to the coalition of forces that were in Afghanistan, NATO partners in there. So that's the only time that this has ever been actually invoked, was for the U.S. when these partners responded. Any thoughts on that so far? If not, I don't know if I'm going to read through all of the articles. There's 14 in total, but the fifth one was the big one. What do you guys think?
I don't think he does know the article. I would say definitely, or Trump does not know which article. And yeah, I think NATO, like my perspective of it was that it was mainly like a US led, like the US can kind of drag in other nations into these events. Like I know they led some bombing of like in Yugoslavia, right, 99, and Article 5 after September 11th, and then like the Libya thing where NATO did a no-fly zone and it led to like the whole regime change. So I think like, yeah, NATO as a whole like is interesting. I think it's like a really interesting global protection force that obviously people will come if called upon, if whatever. But like, I think like the dawn of everything, the thought here is like, if anything is possible, we could have any sort of NATO alliance. It would be really cool to have like non-militarized alliance in the world that's like focused on like disaster relief and like, economic relief, like anyway. But I think as a structure of global means of defense, there should be an alliance. I don't know about the militarization of it, but really interesting. And I think, of course, they will come to our aid if called upon.
I think that too is like Article 5 is definitely the military option here, but they do talk about like how do we how can we work together economically too, right? Like that's not the only option on the table here. And I think like me reading through like some of the articles and kind of like reading through it, it's very idealistic. Like a lot of these sound awesome, right? It'd be great. Have we lived up to that the whole time? Like definitely not. To your point about the US, yeah, I mean, we were critical in this standing up in the first place, like founding members here, like doing a lot of the funding. In the 14 different articles, it says after the treaty has been enforced for 20 years, any party may cease to be a party 1 year after its notice of denunciation has been given to the government of the United States of America, which will inform the governments of the other parties of the deposit of each notice of denunciation. So it's like, yeah, we are a critical part of this organization. And if the point of it was actually to, like it says here in these different articles, was to keep peace and what was the first one? Settle any international dispute in which they may be involved by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered. Right? That's idealistic. That sounds awesome. That'd be great if that was actually the case for all of these organizations. Yeah, like this, the U.S. was a cornerstone for a lot of this. But now what we're saying about Greenland kind of challenges the whole structure. It falls apart if the U.S. can just go and try to strong arm another NATO member into giving them their territory. Like what's the point of this?
Yeah, it's super weird, this whole situation. I appreciate the history of NATO overview because I didn't know a lot of this. And the thought that just occurred to me is like, in Mean Girls, Regina George enjoyed her clique for a while. And she was Queen Bee, and it was sort of her idea, her organization, her friend group. And everyone was just happy to be a part of Regina George's clique. But then she decided to wear sweatpants to school one day, and her friends knew the rule. You couldn't sit with us if you were wearing sweatpants. And so Regina George just sort of blew up and went off on the whole group. And this whole treaty doesn't really account for that scenario. I didn't read every article carefully, but I was trying to skim through them all. It doesn't say what to do if the United States gets really mad at all the rest of us and wants to take over our land and resources for their tech bro financiers, which is what they're trying to do with Greenland, this whole tech bro utopia fantasy land, whatever. The group that started the organization doesn't want to play anymore. So now what do you do? It's weird. And what you were saying about the sort of idealistic language of the document and everything, this is kind of the propaganda of all of our founding documents. You could do the same sort of analysis with, you read the Constitution last season, right, on the podcast. You could go through those documents too and point out the idealistic language that sounds great. In theory, have we actually lived up to it is the question. And that's always been my point about democracy as an ideal of like, that's the big propaganda for me, is that we have a democracy. Do we? When you actually analyze it, not really. We never really have. We've gotten better and better in some ways, of course, but we've never really achieved full majority consent of the governed for whoever is governing. It hasn't happened yet. So these are all still just ideals and aspirations we're trying to live up to. I don't know what happens to NATO now. It kind of seems like the party's over. I don't know how it holds together if the U.S. government is the one that's supposed to hold it together, and it's the one that's trying to do what it's trying to do now. Very weird situation to be in.
Yeah. Your point there is like, it is like when the U.S. is called out in this document as like, hey, if someone wants to leave or something like that, you got to go to the U.S. government. Like there's just this assumption that the U.S. is always going to live by like the same rules that we thought of in 1949, right? There's no safeguard there. Same thing with the Constitution, right? Framers clearly did not expect that there would be a point where Congress would just lay down and let the executive branch do whatever they want with no check on the power, right? Maybe somebody thought that was going to happen, but they probably would have needed to write something in. I think they did. It was, what was that art? Was that the 25th Amendment? That was to remove some, chaos person from power. Guess we're not doing that. Not doing impeachment, but anyway. And it's funny that you mentioned, so like, I guess the question becomes, so what is the theory, right? If the U.S. was the one that helped build this rules-based law and order society, global society, right? In theory, in the ideal world, then what does the Trump regime actually think? What's their theory on power? So in order to get an idea of that, I want to show you guys a quick clip Stephen Miller talking about Greenland, and see what you guys think about Stephen Miller's view on this.
Denmark is a tiny country with a tiny economy and a tiny military. They cannot defend Greenland. They cannot control the territory of Greenland. Under every understanding of law that has existed about territorial control for 500 years, to control a territory, you have to be able to defend a territory, improve a territory, inhabit a territory. Denmark has failed on every single one of these tests. So they want us to spend hundreds of billions of dollars defending a territory for them that is 25% bigger than Alaska at 100% American expense. But they say, while we do this, it belongs 100% to Denmark. It's a raw deal. It's an unfair deal. And most importantly, it's unfair to the American taxpayer, who have subsidized all of Europe's defense for generations now. American dollars, American treasure, American blood, American ingenuity is what keeps Europe safe and the free world safe. And Donald Trump's insisting that we be respected, Sean.
Steve Miller. There are so many things that he just said that are straight up lies and wrongs, but I guess the one that I'd just like to focus on for a sec, because he said the rule or the law is like 500 years. So I think we just read a treaty that talks about exactly how defense of Greenland would come into play through NATO, which has, more than just the United States that's paying into this, obviously. Point being, right, that collective defense of Greenland is already accounted for in the treaties that we've signed with the countries that we've been allies with since World War II. I don't know what Stephen Miller's talking about here. Sounds a lot more like the theory of, the strong are going to do what they can and the weak basically just have to deal with it.
I just wanted to point out how neatly everything he said parallels to just the whole colonial discourse. I mean, he mentioned 500 years, which is the period of European colonialism that we're still living in. From just the point of view he's taken, I guess, is like plainly the colonists' point of view. Those criteria he mentioned for the territory, defense was one of them. But the one that caught me was improving the territory, which was the argument that the colonists used against indigenous groups. Oh, they're just sitting here. They're not doing anything with the land. Even though they were doing things with the land. There are indigenous land management techniques that have been going on for thousands of years, but it just looked like quote unquote savage land. And so they didn't have a legal right to it because they weren't improving it. This whole legal discourse that he's invoking is just the default colonial position. Just sort of mask off, I'm a colonist kind of moment. Which I think plays into this theory of power that you're going to talk about, I think. This whole big versus small kind of theory.
I think so, definitely. We'll play a quick thing here that talks about something that I think we've talked about quite a bit here, which is that theory of big fuck small, but does it with better language and actually talks about the philosophers that invoked this in the first place, right? So let's go back to the ancient history here for a second, and I'll share this.
In his 2012 book on politics, political historian Alan Ryan reflects on the conflict between Athens and Milos during the Peloponnesian War. It is famous as the worst atrocity committed by a usually decent society, but even more as one of the most famous assertions in history of the rights of unbridled power. In this video, we will explore the encounter between the political realism of Athens and the political idealism of Milos. The Peloponnesian War was fought by the Athenian Empire against Sparta's Peloponnesian League from 431 to 404 BC. Milos was a small island that wished to remain neutral during the war. The Athenians threatened to destroy Milos unless it became an ally of Athens and paid tribute. Despite the threats, Milos refused to agree to the Athenian terms. As a result, Athens slaughtered all men of military age and enslaved all of the women and children. In the ancient Greek historian Thucydides' account of the war, he imagines the dialogue that took place between the Athenian and Melian ambassadors before the battle. The Melian ambassadors assert that though they are weaker than Athens, they will prevail against them with the help of the gods, because the Athenians are unjustly abusing their power. We trust that the gods may grant us fortune as good as yours, since we are just men fighting against unjust. The Athenians retort that both gods and men respect only one thing, power. Of the gods we believe, and of men we know, that by a necessary law of their nature, they rule wherever they can, And it is not as if we were the first to make this law or to act upon it when made. We found it existing before us and shall leave it to exist forever after us. All we do is to make use of it, knowing that you and everybody else, having the same power as we have, would do the same as we do. The political policies of Athens and Milos illustrate the competing theories of political realism and political idealism. Political realists believe that maintaining power and acquiring more power are and ought to be the primary motivations of states. Questions of morality are secondary to this pursuit of power. Political idealists, on the other hand, believe that human beings are naturally altruistic and that questions of morality ought to be a primary consideration in forming the policies of a state. It is important to note that political idealists are not pacifists. Milos chose to go to war rather than to accept Athens' terms of peace. The difference between Athens and Milos is the motivation behind their actions. Athens was motivated by the maintenance and acquisition of power, while Milos was motivated by purely moral sentiments. Ultimately, the victory of realism over idealism, or vice versa, is dependent upon the military strength of the states that embrace each theory. In this case, Athens possessed military superiority over Milos and utterly defeated the small island nation. In World War II, however, idealism achieved a victory over realism because the Allied powers, who were primarily motivated by moral sentiments, possessed military superiority over the Axis powers, who were primarily motivated by a desire for power. To conclude, the clash between Athens and Milos during the Peloponnesian War has much to teach us about international affairs and the competing theories of political realism and political idealism. History has demonstrated that the victory of one theory over the other is dependent upon the military strength of the states in conflict. Thucydides' account of the Peloponnesian War provides a concise expression of this harsh fact. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must.
So other than using clips from 300 for some of his PowerPoint structure here, this was the second one. I think this was like a second 300 movie with whatever. Anyway, so I think that kind of like does a okay job, like just highlighting the argument here that they're using. Really, it's just like, because we can, and because right now we're the strongest. I'm speaking like well, no, I don't want to speak like Stephen Miller's internal monologue. That's terrifying. But I guess the theory is, right, they're thinking, hey, we're the strongest right now. No one can compete with us militarily. We can do whatever we want, and no one can really stop us. And so if the ultimate goal is just gain more power, and we can do that, then why not move forward with that? Right? Like, what's anyone else going to do to stop them, pretty much, is what Stephen Miller's kind of saying here in his belief. And that's the position that the administration is taking when it comes to international politics. It's less about treaties, whatever's been set up since World War II, burn that down. That doesn't matter. It's about who's got power, who's got it right now. And that's how they're trying to wield it. And maybe this works in the short term, but long term, is this really like the strongest or the smartest idea if you're trying to have a stable country or a stable, population?
I thought that picture of Machiavelli that he had in the PowerPoint looked a lot like Stephen Miller, which was kind of funny. And I thought also that I hope this football player got an A on his philosophy project, because it sounds like he worked really hard on it. And it was really well organized and clear, but he was a little aggressive with his delivery. I feel like through the history of the United States, there have been like different arguments given for why colonial things need to take place, and for a long time they were providence, they were religious. I can't remember the name of the artist, but there's this famous painting of a giant white lady goddess type figure marching across the plains and chasing all the Native Americans west, and it was sort of this image of manifest destiny. Because God wills it, we're allowed to just plunder all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And
I
they
tweeted
just
that picture out, by the way.
amazing.
Recently.
So I think that's the historical iconography that they have at their disposal. They know that's in the propaganda of the history of this country. People already have those images in mind. Especially right-wing Christian people still are moved by those arguments. They still find them convincing and believe in them. So there's that they're working with. But for the people who aren't convinced by those sort of overt religious arguments that a lot of us find silly now, they go back to this thing that you're pointing out, which is, why not? We're the strong. we're the big, we can do it. There's nothing they can do to stop us. We deserve it. We're the greatest country on the face of the earth. Why not? And they're sort of putting you in the position of either identifying with this strongman group or marking yourself as the enemy. And it's sort of just, I don't know, there's no nuance to it. It's just an overt flex of power that you can either do something to stop or you can shut up and deal with it.
I guess I was thinking about Hannah Arendt in her writings of like power, talks about like violence versus power and how violence is like immediate, coercive, and it's largely based out of fear. And then power is like collective and relational, and people have to work implicitly together and give consent for power to work. And when a state increasingly relies on violence and killings, it like shows an erosion of legitimate power, or what she calls legitimate power. And violence really appears when like authority is failing. So I think that like Trump definitely understands intimidation and fear, and they think of power as like dominating people's bodies or something. And that just shows the legitimate authority is completely eroding.
The other article that I was thinking about reading instead of playing that video, it kind of goes into a little bit more detail on like, what does this do in the long run, right? What is taking this approach mean long term of, you know, we can do it, so let's do it, right? Of we're the powerful now. And it talks a little bit more about the Athenians and what happened after that conflict with Milos, and it's talking about how, you know, essentially they went on to, you know, high on their power of just destroying this island nation. They went on to fight Sparta and were completely, you know, taken out. So it's like, you know, the problem with this theory of like, we're the most powerful, therefore we deserve to do whatever we want, is that does the exact same thing to everyone else. That's the permission structure for China and Russia. We're strongest in our area, so let's do whatever we want. And with the way that the U.S. is currently weakening its own, you know, international treaties and all of our, we're in a much weaker position, or we will be in a much weaker position as a nation state at the end of this than where we started, right? So like, then what happens? I guess is the, you know, keep following this logic, right? If this becomes the way of the world, if you have the power to do it, then do it. And I'm just gaming it out. Let's say we actually somehow get Greenland, right? U.S. now owns Greenland, which, as Stephen Miller said, is a third of the size of the U.S. or whatever. Like, it's this massive area, but NATO's not going to help us defend that if we just destroyed NATO in order to get it, right? We're putting ourselves in a weaker long-term position by doing all of these things.
Just as a kind of dovetail with the stuff I'm going to talk about to set up, when I started grad school at Delaware, my first classes, the professor said, and she was talking about the way us as grad students needed to relate to each other. There's a lot of competition in grad school. Everybody wants to be the smartest person in the room or whatever. But she gave good advice that first day and said, collaboration is always better than competition. And I think this applies to what we're talking about on like a nation state level. And NATO was an example of trying to collaborate. The U.S. government is now to competition above all else. And so, I don't know, just as an organizing strategy, if you can include and enfold and collaborate with more and more and more people, you're stronger as a group through that distributed collaboration with each other, rather than seeing everyone as your competitor you're trying to one-up or whatever. How can I collaborate with this person and bring them into my group rather than persist in this competitive quid pro quo, zero-sum situation with them?
This is like so on point with like just the mindset. I think it's this weird thing where we have all of the levers that we would need to increase the defense in Greenland right now through NATO, through treaties, through all these things. But it's this obsession with ownership and control and whatnot. And we won't go into this a whole bunch here, but Joe, you mentioned it earlier. Why is there this obsession with ownership and control? Like, I don't know. I was listening to the Pod Save America guys, and they keep talking about Greenland as this Trump obsession with like maps and the way it looks. But Joe, you said it earlier. This is all billionaire Praxis network state stuff from the cap, like Peter Thiel, the PayPal mafia, the guy that Trump.
Feudalism.
Yeah, it's techno-feudalism 100%. Like, that's why they want to own the land so that they no longer have to answer to the country of Denmark on regulations. the US government in the future, where maybe they don't have somebody in charge that they want, like unregulated, they want their own thing that they can just go and do whatever they want with no control. Um, in fact, the guy that Trump appointed to be the ambassador to Denmark, his name is Kenneth A. Howry. He's the U.S. ambassador to Kingdom of Denmark, and he's one of the biggest proponents of Praxis and the network state. He's literally part of the PayPal mafia with Peter Thiel. So like that's the why here, right? Like that's the why I think that people aren't talking about like as much behind this too. Maybe we'll get into that more later. Or you can just go listen to all of Gil Duran's podcast, The Nerd Reich. He explains it very well. He has awesome people on to talk about that are very knowledgeable in it. And I think there's only like 12 episodes. He does once a month. So if you're interested in that, I'd say check it out.
Are you an active and engaged citizen? Do you have the kind of unyielding loyalty that deserves to be rewarded? Obey is proud to introduce the next evolution of civic participation, the Freedom Points Premium Program.
I was a leader in the Freedom Points program. I've always reported unauthorized activity while maintaining a respectable social footprint, but I felt like I'd hit a ceiling with the rewards.
The Freedom Points Premium Program is for those who are ready to take their commitment to the next level. Our system doesn't just reward positive social contributions, it provides you with a path to total control over your future. With Premium, you get priority access to enhanced security, guaranteed legal counsel, and exclusive access to classified information. It's loyalty perfected.
With Premium, you also gain priority status for all of the perks you know and love from the Freedom Points and Freedom Points Plus programs, like exclusive access to secured public spaces and faster response time from essential services.
I've already earned enough for a priority upgrade on my own surveillance system. It feels great knowing my contribution to a safer society is being recognized.
Don't just be a citizen, be a leader. Join Freedom Points Premium today. Obey. Your loyalty perfected.
All Freedom Points are subject to review by the Obey algorithm and may be rescinded due to a lack of social compliance. So, like I said, good advice that I got was collaboration is always better than competition. So, good news is that people are working together. Howard Zinn's history, A People's History of the United States, does a good job of detailing this for the last several hundred years, that oppressed people have always found ways to come together and resist their oppressors. Before the U.S. Revolution against Britain, white peasants, enslaved people, and indigenous people in the colonies were working together to resist their colonial overlords. And these collaborations continued to take place throughout all of what we know as U.S. history. And people are working together now. Minneapolis and Minnesota, there's a good example of this around the stuff that happened over the weekend. So I just kind of want to go over a little bit of that. Democracy Now! Had a good report about this that interviewed a lot of the organizers. Links to all this stuff will be in the show notes, I think, if you want to go see the reports or read them for yourself. So, yeah, a lot of the organizers in Minneapolis in that area have been working together on signal chats, have been setting up neighborhood groups that regularly patrol areas of the neighborhood and look out for ICE agents and warn their neighbors if people are sweeping through. And it's a good example of how you can just coordinate with technology and do basic mutual aid to just sort of watch out for everybody. I'm sure your neighborhood, if you're concerned about this kind of thing, probably has a signal chat or some organization you can join. I'll mention a little bit of that later on. The second article or the second link I put in the chat anyway, is from In These Times. It's a report by Sarah Lazar that does a good job of just overviewing the whole organizing efforts behind this past weekend in Minneapolis, of everything that went on. There were reports of between 50 and 100,000 people in Minneapolis on Friday showing out to protest in solidarity with the general strike. They showed out in negative 9-degree temperatures. So some 75,000 people by some estimates in negative 9-degree temperatures to come together and protest. There was a lot of organizing that went into this leading up to this past Friday. One of the key strategies that I want to emphasize as an example from the organizers in Minneapolis is how they pressured complicit businesses and businesses in general to just kind of pick a side. Workers at local businesses pressured their bosses to sign pledges of solidarity with the protest. And so over 700 businesses ahead of the protest had already announced that they were going to be closed in solidarity with this. And that just goes to show what you can do when you pressure companies to do the right thing. And that's a key part of their organizing strategy, is to pressure corporations, not just beg and beg and beg the government to finally step up and do something. Let's talk about it where they care the most, which is the money. That's what the whole strategy behind a general strike is attacking the profit that they care so much about. They pressured complicit businesses. They targeted airlines that specifically are complicit with these deportation flights out of Minneapolis as a key part of that. I just wanted to mention a couple of those things as examples of community organizing, mutual aid. If you're in the Minneapolis or Minnesota area, iceoutnowmn.com is the main organizing website for that region. There are a lot of materials on their website for connecting with organizations where you are. There's a national solidarity map you can look at. I've mentioned the General Strike US many times on last season's podcast, but again, generalstrikeus.com/strike card. They're trying to get everyone to sign strike cards so that they have a list of people who have sort of committed to joining the general strike when they call for it. Their goal, I think, was 11 million. They've got 500,000 already, or nearly 500,000. With everything we've seen in Minnesota over this last couple of weeks, with the stuff that happened in Chicago in the fall, with the mayor of a major city calling for a general strike, you're seeing a lot of this strategy start to gain some traction. So I feel like this general strike strategy, even if it's only for now on a city to city level, will start to get more wind in its sails, if you will. Obviously, we could do a lot more with it if we could get on a national level organized in a distributed way for everyone to strike at the same time. That might take some time. It might take some patience. I remember when what's the name of the union? The UAW, United Auto Workers, Sean Fain's union, when they won their contract last year, I think it was 2024 when they won their contract, he set their contract, a 5-year contract, to expire on May Day 2028, which is International Workers' Day of 2028, and he encouraged other unions to also set up their contracts to expire on that exact same date. So that the plan going forward is that May Day 2028, these unions are trying to set up a massive, potentially national, potentially global general strike situation where all of these union contracts expire at the same time, and then all these workers are freed up to go on strike at the same time. So that's sort of a long-term strategy, general strike-wise, that people are building up to. So set your calendar, May Day 2028. If you have a union, talk to your union leaders about that. If you just want to look up people in your area who are working together to set up mutual aid, you can go to generalstrikeus.com. They have Discord channels set up for all the local metropolitan areas. You can get connected on a Discord channel with people in your area doing mutual aid. Again, collaboration is always better than competition. Your fellow human beings, we have to be here for each other. And this is sort of where theory meets practice, which is what praxis really is, the combination of theory and practice. So this is how it works. If we want to make non-hierarchical collaborative organizations work for us, we have to build them, and it starts on a local level. So connecting with your local groups, getting started, is how we start to make it happen. But it's exciting and a little bit hopeful to see more and more general strike traction pick up speed. So those are my good news thoughts for this episode. Interested to hear if you guys have any thoughts in response to any of that.
I love it. I love it. As much as they use fear and violence, that's like hope and community and solidarity. And I really hope that it goes from city to city, and it is like a, ember that lights the fire, that it can go nationwide and globally, definitely. I think that it's super important, and it is one of the only tools that we have, especially given what the next election is teeing up to be. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and I think, Joe, the other thing there that's really important to continue to pay attention to what's going on in these cities that have already learned a lot of lessons, and getting prepared for other places, because it's not stopping. It's gonna go to another city, and so like trying to figure out what's happened in Minnesota, what works well. I mean, I think the whistles has carried over like from DC. Honestly, I don't know if it's because I'm watching Fallout and playing Fallout 4, but it makes me think of like the Minutemen, like these observers that pop out, like they hear about this, they blow the whistle, they let people know immediately as fast as they can, try to be there really fast. So like, hey, what works well, I think it's good. That's good to follow. And speaking of community engagement, if you are in the Saranac Lake area, we have our Winter Carnival starting here in like a week. I think it's February 7th. Yes, when that starts. And at the Adirondack Voter for Change Community Hub, 28 Broadway in Saranac Lake, they're going to be doing presentation of the Lorax, the original. It's like 1970s, like 25-minute movie that they're going to be looping a couple times. And we're also going to have a walkthrough exhibit, Lorax Forest, where you can go and vote on what issues you think are important. And we'll have handouts, information on how you can actually get involved to support those different issues. So come on down, check it out. They also have some mutual aid things set up there. So if you want to get involved in the local community in Saranac Lake, come visit during the Winter Carnival and see what the Adirondack Voters for Change is all about. So that's all I've got for this week.
I think it's the time that some congressional candidates are announcing and different runs, of course, not just Congress, but when going to Congress, I would just encourage people, check if your local Democrat or Republican voted for the Lake and Riley Act back in the day here. It really set the stage for a lot of this anti-immigration events that we're seeing. So just check in and see who's running and support your local progressive.
Noah would be happy that you mentioned that. The Lake.
Yeah, definitely.
That reminded me too. You guys know where we got the stickers? Rocket Monkey or something like that. They just got bought out by Sticker Mule. Yeah, and that guy's running for New York 21. That's my district. The guy that owns Sticker Mule. Super Trump. I actually got one of his ads on YouTube today. So great. Looking forward to that.
Now we need a new sticker place.
We do need a new sticker place because I'm not donating to that guy. Sure. All right. Well, hey, next week we will be back with our core episode on Tuesday. Like we mentioned in this one, we're going to talk a little bit more about the rhetoric and narrative coming out of the Trump administration on these shootings in Minnesota, what they're saying, why they're saying it, and try and hopefully illuminate that a little bit more. Next week, we'll also start back up with our Thursday episodes. And I think the first one we're planning for is getting into the deep dive on Edward Bernays and kind of like the American propaganda from World War I, World War II, and how that's influencing today. And then last thing I want to mention is we will be doing book club after that deep dive. And the first book that we're starting with this season is Minority Rule, The Right-Wing Attack on the Will of the People and the Fight to Resist It by Ari Berman, also the author of Give Us the Ballot. So this is what we're starting with for book club season 2. That's all we got for this week. Stay safe, and remember that propaganda loves you. That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening and hanging out with us.
If you enjoy the show, help us spread the word. Leave a rating or review and share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think would get something out of these conversations.
Your ratings, reviews, and shares help this show grow, and the more people listening, the harder it is for propaganda to win.
So until next time,
stay aware, stay safe, and remember,
propaganda loves you.